Welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name is Jessie, the host of this podcast, which is all about beverage innovation. I talk with innovation pioneers from agriculture to glass. This week, I'm speaking with Susan Coss, founder of Mezcalistas and North of the Border Adventures. Mezcalistas started as a blog and has turned into their media arm and number one resource for info on the world of Mezcal, an expanding world of Mexican spirits. North of the Border Adventures is a media, events, and consulting company dedicated to promoting and celebrating the world of Mexican craft spirits and all things Mexican at their Mexico in a Bottle events in 6 cities across the U.S. Her team also hosts private events, including virtual gatherings. They also consult on brand launches, business development, and events. Susan has 30 plus years of marketing, communications, and event planning in the food, beverage, retail, tech, financial, and news sectors. She became enamored by Mezcal on a trip to Oaxaca, and after meeting those that produce it in a careful and crafty way with less production, she was hooked on educating the industry and consumers to try and love Mezcal. I'm uncertain of her impact on the popularity of Mezcal, but since she's been educating us in America for nearly 13 years, it puts her up against anyone teaching from the ground up.
Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe to be notified of all new episodes.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm super excited. I have Susan Coss here today. Hi, Susan. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing really well, Jessie. I'm so excited to be here. I just take any opportunity I can to talk spirits with folks. So thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah, of course. And you're specific to Mezcal. You're all in on Mezcal, so I can't wait to get in and talk about your perspective in the industry and see, your insights and all that you're doing, because you're doing a lot for the category, which is super awesome. So, Susan, we met through another couple, that was on the podcast. So it was Anna and Juan Pablo with La Reina Recia, right?
That is correct. That is correct. From Atenguillo.
Atenguillo,
in the coastal mountains of Jalisco.
Yeah, they are a super couple. You get mesmerized, by them. I think they're really incredible people, and I'll do anything to help them, that I can.
And I think they have a really, they're doing an interesting kind of approach, as they're spreading the word about Raicilla. It's another agave spirit that has its own denominación. It is very, very, very small, mostly unknown outside of the core group of, hardcore agave spirits drinkers. And to raise the profile of it, they are working with high-end designers to kind of put like with like, really seeing Raicilla as an incredibly valuable high-end designed piece of art, much like a piece of clothing or a pair of shoes or something like that. And it could be said taking an influencer route as a lifestyle brand. But also, I think, it's an interesting way to introduce people to what has been an unknown spirit, and just from the gates be like, this is valuable, it's worth the price, and you should drink it.
It was certainly an emotional experience when I tried it. Obviously it was the storytelling and whatnot behind the brand, and, how they started it and why they started it. But then you go and you taste it, and it's nothing like I've ever tasted before. I mean, yeah, it's still agave, but it's different. It's just a different level of greatness that I can't really explain.
Well, I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about agave spirits, is that no one tastes like the other, especially when you're introducing agaves that are grown in different regions, different altitudes, different varieties of agave. All of the different wild yeasts that are introduced in the fermentation process. I mean, there's so many factors that go into it, which is why it's just like this never-ending rabbit hole that you go down as you're tasting stuff.
So it's kind of like you're comparing it to what wine was like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much like a wine story. There's the terroir story. There's the variety
Single
story.
vineyard.
There's single vineyard. Estate grown versus non-estate grown. And so it's like the easiest audience I find to talk to about mezcal are wine drinkers, because as soon as you say terroir, as soon as you say variety, they're like, oh, I get it. I think in terms of flavor profiles, an easy group to talk to are like whiskey and scotch drinkers, because there's an overlap of kind of that roasted flavor that you can get in whiskeys and scotch, like you get in agave spirits, mezcal, and others. I think the hardest people to talk to sometimes are tequila drinkers.
Yeah, because
which is a really interesting thing. Yeah.
And it's funny that you say agave spirits. One of the things I've really learned through this podcast and talking to people as I started this journey is people don't call it tequila anymore. They call it agave spirits. It's a thing. In other words, they're not lumping this whole category into tequila. They're calling it agave spirits because they are made differently. They're from different regions. They have different, I think Raicilla is Maximiliana.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it's, well, everything has a different denominación de origen. So tequila has its own DO. It was the first of the agave spirits to get a DO. And then mezcal got a DO. And, Raicilla is relatively new to having its own denominación. Bacanora has one. And Sotol, which though not agave, is made in a similar manner as other agave spirits, has a DO. The only ones that are recognized by the United States are tequila and mezcal.
So we got to change that.
Yes. I mean, that would be a good thing. So that's why you can't, even if it's an agave spirit that's made, in California or Texas, it can never be labeled a tequila or a mezcal, because we recognize the DO for it. We being the
that's
United
really
States.
Cool. Yeah, and I talked to Claire Warner earlier this year, and she went to Tales of the Cocktails, and she's really in tune with the whole mixology world and I asked her about trends, and the first thing she said was, she's all in on low and no, so that's just a given. Mm-hmm. But the first thing she said was agave spirits. You're going to see an increase in different types of agave spirits, and we are seeing that, and I think it's exciting. We know tequila really well. Let's discover some other stuff.
It is exciting. It has been very interesting to see the growth over the past 10, 11 years, and the explosive growth specifically over the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah. And, it's like you can say tequila opened the market for agave spirits. And I think that, what began really opening the market to agave spirits like mezcal and then the others that are following is, the beginnings of a recognition that things should not be inexpensive just because it's coming from Mexico. And so as you saw a different level of Mexican restaurants that were opening, as you saw mezcal coming into the market that was higher priced than tequila, it began to change the perception of a market where it's like, oh, okay, this is actually really good. This is actually a really good craft product. Okay, let's pay a little bit more for it. And, and that opened unbelievable doors, that we're seeing come to fruition today. Like, the interest in overall agave spirits, things like Bacanora, Raicilla. There's smaller ones like Tuchka. There's Comiteco. There's just a lot in Mexico. The doors have been open. It's raising awareness now. But also because of that, you're seeing interest in other things like Mexican wines.
I can't wait to discover those.
The oldest vineyard in North America was actually in Mexico. and
Really?
producing wine there. Yes. And and you're also seeing things like Mexican gins and Mexican whiskeys, Mexican
Good.
rums.
That's great.
That there is just a door has been opened to the variety of craft things that are in Mexico, the abundance of flavors, the ingredients, and the respect from what is coming out of there.
Yeah, I think, we were so trained on the, mass produced tequilas, right? You put them in margaritas, you do mixed cocktails, whatever. And so do you think that with the growth of mezcals, that kind of helped it become more of a craft idea, and it's, not high production and it's a little bit more hands on, and kind of
I don't.
helped raise the level
I,
of
I mean,
quality?
it's an interesting question. Do I think that tequila raised the quality of mezcal, or do I think that mezcal is beginning to raise the quality of tequila? I
Right. Yeah,
think
no, for sure.
because I think that's a question. I think no. I mean, mezcal was always mezcal, and it had been looked down upon for a long time in Mexico because it was seen as a poor person's drink, because much of the continual production of mezcal came from regions like in Oaxaca or in Michoacan or in Guerrero, in places that have a larger indigenous population. There was just a bias baked into it. I think talking about Mexican classism and racism is, I mean, that's a semester long or a whole college study to get into that. So as mezcal became more popular, because you had Del Maguey and Ron Cooper that was introducing this idea of the single village mezcals, and bringing bartenders down to Oaxaca to like see the production, to taste the product. And these bartenders, this was like in 2007, 8, 9, maybe a little bit before then. Like they became evangelists for mezcal, so that when other kind of artisanal mezcals began to come into the US market, there was a very dedicated audience for that. And people who were just like, I mean, serious aficionados. And so it grew, it grew, it grew, and then all of a sudden it just started exploding. But I want to put that into context. It's like still this much of the overall spirits market. It's tiny.
Do you know what percentage it is
And
of the agave spirits?
God, I want to say something like 4 or 5%. I
Yeah.
mean, it's literally a drop in the bucket when compared to tequila production.
Right. Well, it's price
And
driven, right? Because not very many people can afford to just go buy a $60 or $80 bottle.
well,
I mean, I know that there's a high
and
end market for sure, but like if you've got tequila that are, between 20 and $40, and you're kind of
I
up
don't
against
I
that.
don't know I don't know if I would call it a price driven market. I think it's more of availability. I think there's some markets in which you have a lot of options when it comes to mezcal, and then there are other markets where maybe there are only 5 to 10 brands that are in the market because they just haven't gone in. Um, with the distribution system that we have here in the
Yeah,
United
fair
States,
point.
that complicates it. I think that people who come into the world of mezcal aren't necessarily tequila people at the beginning.
Hmm.
They could be craft spirits people, but I don't think that that's the natural like progression. And I say that because the flavors are so wildly different. And if you're somebody who is drinking inexpensive tequila that's going to be diffuser made, it may or may not have additives in it. Um, it's going to be a bit of a shock to your taste buds when you have a mezcal that's made in a completely different way. And and you're getting the flavors of the agave in a real kind of source authentic way that in the production of tequila in the distilleries where there's autoclaves, there's the diffusers, you're not getting the wood roast flavors as you do in mezcal, just because of that cooking process. And then when you look at other tequilas that say are roasting their agaves in brick ovens, or some that are beginning to go back into the underground ovens, they're going to have more complex flavors than so many of the tequilas that are on the market. I mean, I will say, ironically, I was a tequila drinker, but not heavily into it, but it was, just kind of the fun thing out, definitely I'll sip on some tequila. And then I found myself in Oaxaca, and was able to sip on some pretty amazing mezcal. And as I went further into that rabbit hole of mezcal, when I would go back to sip on tequila, I found it less and less interesting, because it just didn't have the complexity of flavors. What I eventually ended up discovering was that it's the agave. I find, it was like, for me, having been exposed to so many other types of agaves that were being used in the making of mezcal, to go back to tequila, which was only using the Tequilina Weber, it was actually the agave that I'm like, well, this isn't one of my favorite agaves. it's totally fine, but there's this other stuff that I like. This past year has been interesting because I have had the opportunity to visit some tequila distilleries, to go to Jalisco for the first time, and was able to sip stuff fresh off the still, like really look at the production process. And and it gave me a much better appreciation of tequila than I had going into it. And I was like, you know what, I recognize that this is a really good tequila, and while the flavor profile might not be like in line with what I want to get from agave spirits, this is really, I recognize that this is delicious, that this is really well made. And and I think that sometimes we get so caught up in what we like, that it's hard to like acknowledge or taste things and be like, I personally, this isn't my jam, but this is still something that's really incredible and delicious.
Yeah, that
So,
makes total sense. And your flavor profile changes, and especially with an experience like you had being there, you know,
yeah,
hearing the
and
stories and the tours, there's nothing like it. Um, can I have you back up just a second? And I'm doing this for my dentist, who says he listens to my podcast, who doesn't know our world. I'm gonna have to ping him now. He's in it. But anyway, could you talk about the difference between tequila and mezcal, and why there's this different flavor profile, and any high level technicalities?
well, there's this oftentimes saying that you will hear that all tequila is mezcal, but not all mezcal is tequila. And that has to do with the fact that the word mezcal means cooked agave. And so through like the hundreds of years in which distilled spirits with agave have been made, everything was referred to as mezcal or vino de mezcal. And and then it would include like a location of where it was from, to give a sense of place or a style. And so you might have seen bottles of vino de mezcal de tequila. Um, Eventually, tequila dropped the first part of it because it had a very successful showing at World's Fair in Chicago, and this was in the 1920s, and it just began to stand out on its own as tequila.
Interesting.
Ted Genoese is working on a history book about tequila, which I'm dying to read, because I will say I am not a tequila expert. And so what I am repeating here is what I have been told. And I've heard it from I've talked to a few different people about it. So I'm assuming there's underlying truth to that. But we all know how verbal history,
Right.
storytelling
Wow,
can
that's
happen.
that's
But
interesting. The World's Fair. I don't know where we'd be as a society without the World's Fair and everything that was discovered
I
over
know,
the years. Oh,
I
it's so
mean,
cool.
it's kind of crazy. And so, as things developed, as, production continued for tequila and mezcal, you really saw changes happening. I actually don't know the exact dates when larger, volume production was happening. And the traditional process of agave spirit making, which was basically to take the harvested pinas, the hearts of the agave plant, to cook them, usually like in an underground oven that was jump started with wood coals that heated rocks, and you're piling things on to cook it there, or within brick ovens that were fired by wood or by gas, sometimes by steam. And then from there, it's the agave is crushed, it is put into fermentation tanks, it is fermented, and then it is distilled. So when people say, I don't like mezcal, it's too smoky for me. I think it's, number one, it's an opportunity to educate people and say it's not really smoke, it is a roast flavor that you're tasting. And if you're tasting something that like is a smoke bomb, it tastes like you were just, licking barbecue for however many days, then something might have gone wrong in the production process, because that shouldn't be like what you are getting. And so it's trying to get people to understand that slow cooking roasting process, whether it's done by wood or gas, or steam, um, is what caramelizes the agave. It cooks that agave. It brings, those sugars out and other flavor notes. And it, all depends on what kind of agave is being used. You can cook that, and then you can actually eat the agave, the cooked agave, afterward. I wouldn't eat too much of it because it's kind of how do we say, a healthy probiotic.
Oh man, they should sell that over here. Can that up.
Which goes back to like fermented agave sap, pulque, things like that. It's really healthy and delicious. And so over time, the production process changed, as tequila became, in some ways, especially with larger distilleries that were opening, more streamlined, more efficient. The guiding rules around tequila began to, allow for uh, yeast to be introduced in the fermentation process. In mezcal, according to the NOM, the regulatory rules, fermentation has to be natural fermentation. You're not adding things into it. There's a lot of use of stainless steel in tequila production. You also have a category called mixtos, where you're acknowledging that you're using a sugarcane distillate or whatever to mix with the agave spirits. That's a separate thing than 100% agave. But within mezcal, you don't have that. There's not a mixto category. It's everything with mezcal has to be 100% agave. You can use different types of agaves. With tequila, it's only the blue agave, Tequilina Weber. So, that's why you get so many different, flavor varieties with, all of that factor, those factors. And, it's like, I don't want to be poo-pooing the tequila industry. But there's a lot that the mezcal category can and should learn from tequila, both positive things that can be done and then the negative things to beware of. And I think unfortunately there's a lot of volume production in the world of mezcal that is mimicking kind of what some of the worst behavior we see on tequila, which is just the race to produce as much as you can, um, and drive the price as low as you can, and just the byproduct wastes that
Right.
come out of large volume production. So that was very rambling.
No, it's
That's not going
interesting.
to help your dentist at all. I'm like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait, the dentist just wants like a clear answer. What's the difference between the two of them? And the easy, simple answer has always been, well, tequila has become a little bit more of an industrialized process, mezcal less so.
Okay, so craft.
Yeah.
If you're to generalize.
Yep. And I think that why mezcal became popular when it did, or started growing in popularity, was it came at a time in the US when there were more conversations about where your food was coming from, who your farmers were, an interest in craft, not just in craft cocktails, but just craft in general. And here comes this product into the market that's completely handmade, that's very small production, that has a beautiful story to it. And I think that's, it just captured people's attention because of that.
Yeah, and I find the flavor profile to be a bit polarizing, where tequila is just tequila. But it can be polarizing too because people are like, "Oh, I got really drunk in college and I'm never drinking it again." And they it's more of a memory, since
Mm-hmm.
remembering back when association, whereas the roasted flavor can really polarize people in one way or the other, one direction or the other.
I mean, it's very true, and it's when I am doing tastings or talking to people, it's like there are always the folks that say, "Oh yeah, I had mezcal one time, and I really didn't like it. Like it was really bad." And I can usually pinpoint exactly which mezcal they had, much like many people who say that about tequila are remembering in college when they had the Jose Cuervo
Yep.
and drinking far too much and got sick. And from there on out, it's just like, I will never drink tequila again.
Exactly.
And have just, been able to turn people around by saying, I know what you had. Now tell me about what it is you like to drink. What do you like to drink and why do you like to drink it? And then I can help guide people to different types of mezcals.
I've done that with
And
wine tasting too.
Yep. I mean,
I
very
want a
rarely
sweet
do you get
wine.
somebody at the end. Yeah. No,
Well, try this
like,
red blend. It's plenty sugary. Oh.
yeah. Or that's that's when you like divert people to dessert wines,
Yeah.
or things like that. And I mean, let's face it, we all begin somewhere on
Yep.
our alcohol journeys, and I think I drank like not long out of college white Zinfandel. I mean, who
It
at
was
this
Bush
point
Light for
I
me,
would
baby,
never
all the
drink,
way.
And then it was, being in California and being able to like try different wines outside of the world of white Zinfandel or Bartles and James,
Yep.
wine coolers.
Wine
And
coolers.
and I have to remember that. And I think, this goes out to everybody to remember that when somebody is first starting to drink something, like their palate is their palate, and you have to develop that palate over time. So
Yeah.
perhaps, it's like, I think, people can be mean to other people when they're like, oh, I just had this, and they'll name a brand and they'll say that they like it. And then people will jump on them and be like, oh my God, how can you like that? And I'm always like, this is a really, big opportunity to be like, oh my God, that's so great. It's a terrific entry point. There's all of these things out there. Welcome to the world of Mezcal. Let's try other stuff as well. And rather than jumping on somebody for like, well, no better. I mean, I can't imagine what people thought when I was drinking White Zinfandel.
Yeah, but it was back in the day when everybody was,
Yeah, it's so I mean, it's that that kind of thing of wanting to bring people along, so that each person can discover for themselves what it is they like sipping on.
Like red wine with fish. Just do what you like.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Because who cares? It's about the experience you're having.
Exactly. It's like the question I get a lot is, what should I pair with Mezcal? And I was like, well, you can pair anything with it. And it's really fun to sit around and like sip and taste and sip and taste.
It's my jams.
Like and see like what works for you, and how that comes out together. And and it's like if you're eating something spicy, you don't want a quote unquote spicy mezcal to go with it. You don't want two things to just like come together to make something even more spicy, so
overpower
it's like playing around
and
with
fight.
Yeah. It's like, what is this? How does this kind of, I don't want to say tone down, but enhance the spice flavor in a way that's doesn't leave you running for more water or milk or something like that.
Right. So, Susan, I feel like we have so much to talk about with Mezcal, but we haven't even started your journey yet. So, if it's okay, I'd like to kind of shift over to you and talk about where are you calling from today?
I live in Alameda, California. It is across the bay from San Francisco. It's an island. The
cool.
shipping channel of Oakland is between us. It's very charming. And we are very lucky to have several distilleries and breweries here on the island.
No way.
Including St. George Distillery.
Aha.
Hangar One had been here.
Okay.
See, and some really delicious.
St. George is blowing up, man. They're awesome.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
The facility here is beautiful. They had closed everything to the public at the onset of the pandemic, and they are finally opening things up, so you can now like book time to do a tasting.
Oh, really? Still? I mean, distillery. That stuff is so strong. It kills all COVID.
As you know.
Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
That's what we thought. And then it was like, no, it actually has to be above 55, 60%. So then it's like, who's got the puntas? But,
How many people live on the island?
I think now we're up to 75,000, almost 80,000 people. It's its own place. Own
microculture.
Yep. It's often referred to as Mayberry by the Bay, or where hipsters go to breed. I feel like
I have to go now. I got to see all these hipsters.
Every rockabilly person I ever knew in San Francisco, lives over here in Alameda. And yeah, I moved here from San Francisco 10 years ago.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Right before the chaos ensued.
Mostly before the chaos ensued.
Yeah.
And it really took the pandemic for me to fully fall in love with Alameda. Because I always felt like, oh, I'd rather be in the city. But being on an island during a pandemic and you have so much open space and just being able to easily get around, versus, the experience that friends of mine had in cities where, they're living in big apartment buildings. They're not able to get out as much. So it was great. We have terrific food. We have awesome drinks.
That's awesome.
It's a great place to be. So
yeah, we didn't meet our neighbors that have lived around us for years until the pandemic. Even we had a dog, and so you do kind of have a new appreciation for your neighborhood and where you're from because you get to meet people that you wouldn't normally have time.
Exactly. So yeah, and we have a big front porch that we sit on and wave to neighbors.
Love it.
Sometimes like the running joke is wanting to be like, get off my lawn.
No dogs allowed.
But we don't. We're very happy about that. So yeah, it's and the positive thing is it's a hop, skip, and a jump to get over to Oakland, to go to the city,
to the airport.
To the airport. So it's convenient in that way. Though I will say, trying to get me to leave the island just becomes ever more difficult. So I'm just like, no, you guys come.
You're gonna have to get one of those seaplanes.
Yes.
No more cars, just planes.
No more cars. But luckily we can take the ferry from Alameda to go over to the city.
Fair,
so that's really nice.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah,
don't try to canoe. Don't try that.
There was a guy who was, he had a pedal boat, and he was doing the commute that way. Which is I think a little dedicated. We'll say dedicated.
Well, it's also a pretty dangerous channel. I've seen some documentaries on the flow of water and why ships wreck and all kinds of cool crazy stuff.
It's pretty intense, and it's cold.
Yeah,
the day is cold.
Yeah.
So
isn't it Mark Twain that has it's the coldest summer or something?
The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco, which actually he never said. But it's a great one to repeat.
I fell for that. I fell for it.
Yep. Now all of us do. Everybody who
where's my Snoops? Should have snooped it.
But I mean, it can be pretty brutal. Summers can be pretty brutal with the fog. And in general, none of us, especially in older buildings, we don't have insulation. We don't have double paned windows. In fact, you're really lucky if the windows do fit tightly, because we have these things called earthquakes, which kind of unbalance, things.
Yes.
So there's a lot of stuff that makes it colder than it could be, and most of us don't even have efficient heating units. So
I wouldn't last 5 minutes.
It's beautiful.
I don't like the cold. It is beautiful though. I've been there a couple of times. It is, but at the cold. That's why I'm in Texas.
It's just
Florida.
fog. You get used to it.
yeah, you do. It's it's that I've been to Washington. I worked for St. Michel for a while, and so I'd go up and hike and have some fun trips. And it was miserably cold because it was cold and damp, and you just feel it in your bones, and you just don't want to move. It's not for me.
Yeah, I went to college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I'm originally from Washington, D.C.
You're from Washington, D.C.?
I am.
Nice.
And I mean, Madison is amazing. It's amazing. But it is really, really, really cold. And the university sits on an isthmus, so the wind blows all the time. So the wind chill factor is actually an important thing when the temperature is already 0 degrees and then the wind is blowing all the time. So you're talking like minus 20 degrees or something. But it was a dry cold, and not that you can ever get used to it, but it's like you can survive when you're walking to class or something, or going to football games or things like that.
Yeah.
I will never forget one time going to a baseball game in San Francisco, and this is when Candlestick Park was still open. Baseball was happening there. and the friends of mine who were too cheap to get the lower deck tickets opted for the upper deck. So you're exposed to all of the wind and fog and everything that's blowing off the bay. And I have never been as cold as I was there. And I say that as somebody who went to a Packers game in Green Bay. And we were just like piled with blankets and everything like that. And I am like, you people are crazy. Like, I am going down, and if I get caught trying to sneak into the lower level, I don't care. If I get thrown out, see you back, home. Like, I just cannot do this. But
Yeah, it's miserable.
yeah,
It's not fun. I'm born and raised in
not
Iowa,
fun.
and it got to, as I got older, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I
Yeah.
just can't do it anymore. I love the snow. I love the snow. I just hate the cold.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like, my birthday's in May. And, when I'm sure as you remember from being in Iowa, as soon as the temperature, would hit like 50 degrees after, the long winter, people would be like, woohoo, spring is here. And you're out in like shorts and things like
Shorts and
that.
flip flops and t-shirts and
All of that. And meanwhile, there's the piles of snow. The lake is still frozen. And, and I just remember one time when it snowed on my birthday. And I was just like, I'm done.
Yeah. This is not for the lighthearted.
No.
You're born and raised in DC, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Which was an amazing and beautiful experience. Washington, D.C. gets so much hate these days.
I know, it's
because,
not the same.
And, and it's like, and it's a stunningly beautiful city.
It is.
That is so green.
I got to live there for 3 months, so I know what you're saying.
Yeah. It's, it's wonderful. And, and I think the saddest thing that really happened, and, not to get into politics or anything like that, but there was a change in the 90s. And a lot of people who were elected to Congress didn't bring their families with them to live in DC.
Oh, really? So there's that was a major change. They brought their families?
Previously people would move to DC with their families. And then, people stopped doing that. And I will say it was more on one party side than the other party side. And that really impacted people living together and being around each other. My public high school had like tons of government employee kids, congressional kids. Like, it was a big mix. And I think that, we all do better when we're living together and we have to interact with one another. It becomes more and more difficult to demonize somebody if you actually have to see them, every day with their kids.
Well, and a lot of that's just for shits and giggles and headlines too. You can't really believe. They used to at least go out to dinner and say whatever, and then, hey, let's go get a drink. I mean, I don't know what they do anymore. It seems so harsh and sad because we need these people to forge on, move forward.
As my dad used to say, he was in the Maryland state legislature for a while. He'd be like, I'd vote with the Democrats all day and party with the Republicans all night. And you don't see that happening, anymore, which is really sad. So, but not to get into politics.
Well, I mean, you're from DC, so you lived it. It was your first impression, your first, 18 years? Until you went to college? Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal. And, and it certainly left its mark on me and my thoughts about like all of the amazing and good things a government can do.
Right.
And a dysfunctional Congress is not the government. So that's...
I did a internship out there, and so I got to live in Foggy Bottom area, which is amazing. And so, we're just hungry college kids, and, I was 20. I can't go to jail for it now. But we were poor, right? We were just college kids, and what was great about DC is that everybody had a happy hour, and of course we had our local watering hole by where we were, and the we would go in every day and eat their buffet for free and have like 4 or 5 beers or whatever and go home. Cost like $20. It was so great because you got bar food and beer. It was great. And I remember one of the bartenders or owners or something. He's like, "You're 21, right?" I go, "Mm-hmm." Yep.
Hmm.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, when I was growing up, I actually lived on the Maryland side. We were 6 blocks from the DC line. And in high school, the drinking age in Maryland was 21. The drinking age in DC was 18 for beer and wine and 21 for liquor. It's very easy for a 16-year-old to look like an 18-year-old.
Yes.
And so friends and I, we had fake IDs. And we would go into DC, and there was a favorite Irish pub that we hung out at, that was tons of fun. I think I drank so many amaretto sours. So
It was great. Great
because
times.
it was just like they're like whatever. It was very fun times. But I had done internships up on Capitol Hill and then also at the Supreme Court, and other friends of mine who were interns
Nice.
as well. Like we had these running jokes. You could hit the rounds of parties, and receptions, and you could eat your way through it, and it's like, and we all
Nice.
had our like intern badges, and we'd be like, "Back off, bitch! I'm an intern. Like I can get in here."
That's great. That is so great.
And it was, and it was a lot of fun. But it was, I will say it was an amazing experience to grow up there, to have the access that I did to,
Right. To really know the truth
really,
of what it.
yeah. And, just to kind of carry that with me. And,
Yeah.
then to end up going to Wisconsin and majoring in agricultural economics. Like,
Interesting.
I was a city kid. But farming backgrounds with both sides of my family. So, we like to say it was in the genes. I did not get the green thumb. I cannot grow things to save my life. So, yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I don't come from the world of wine, and spirits. I worked in bars, I worked in restaurants, but that's not my background at all. I
So
came
you went
into
to.
this completely as a writer.
That's awesome. So let's go back to. Okay, so you went to University of Wisconsin in Madison, which, by the way, is an amazing city, 100%. And you major in ag. So then what happens after that?
So, then my best friend and I go on a cross country trip around the US,
Nice.
because we graduated at a time in which there were no jobs because there was a recession. I'm going to date myself. It was 1989 when this happened.
Yeah.
So I'm on the older end of things. And, and part of the reason for that trip was for us to figure out, I don't know, where do you want to move? I don't know, where do you want to move? Because we were not moving any place for jobs. And, we started asking people in the various places that we stopped what they thought was better, food or sex. And
oh, that's a good article to write about.
And there were only 2 cities in which people thought about the answer and then, like really talked around it. And those 2 cities were New Orleans and San Francisco. Having grown up in Washington, D.C., I was like, I'm done with humidity. New Orleans is not going to happen for me. And so then I ended up moving out to San Francisco, and never looked back. I'll also
That is
say
incredible.
at the time,
2 words. 2 words. Change your life.
2 words. Change my life. And I never thought that I was California bound. Like it never really interested me. One year for my birthday, my mother gave me a National Geographic that was from my birth year and month, so May 1966. And on the cover was the Golden Gate Bridge. And, and so I look at that and I'm like, that's kind of interesting.
It is
Maybe I
interesting.
always was destined to end up out here. But no, I mean, San Francisco ended up being a great place to land. And I just bounced through different jobs, careers.
On the ag side?
No, never on the ag side.
No. Okay.
It was like, no, of course not. And it was because there was an interesting thing in terms of nonprofit work. And I think it continues to today. Because it is so low pay compared to everything else, I think the people who look at working in nonprofits, and at least back then, had to have some kind of assistance monetarily. So whether it be from a partner or from family money or something like that, it made it really hard to live in San Francisco. And so most of the types of jobs that fell into agricultural economics were more on the nonprofit side. And it just it got to be to the point where it's like, this is not fun. I would like to be able to make a living,
Right.
and
enjoy.
and then from there, enjoy
it.
So I ended up, I worked for the duty-free retailer and their international headquarters, worked in their food and candy department, and it was development of products, marketing and packaging. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool. I got to learn about coffee very early on, before coffee became a thing. And then bounced around there in other categories, finally ending up in marketing. And then I bounced over to the the tech industry, first working for a financial tech publication, and then kind of going into the investor relations and PR side of stuff. All of this, I'm still doing food related things. A friend of mine was a caterer, was working with her, was going to conferences around food sustainability and other things, because food had always really been my passion. And then just reached a point where I was like, yeah, this tech stuff, just,
it's not fulfilling.
It's not my thing. It's not fulfilling. And quit everything, and then just said, I want to work in food, and and had no idea what that meant. And then I ended up working on a slow food event that happened in San Francisco, doing marketing, managing the big sponsorships. And then from there co-founded a food festival called Eat Real Festival. And then as all of this is happening, I am traveling back and forth to Oaxaca, because I have the ability to do that with events work, which gave me chunks of free time.
Nice.
So these, everything is kind of happening simultaneously. And my growth, my interests have always been, agriculture, economic development, story, because I wrote, and craft food, sustainable food. And I first traveled to Oaxaca in 2003. Just say stereotype, fell in love Oaxaca. Never got it out of my blood, had to go back. It was the most amazing experience of my life, in all seriousness. And my worlds began getting closer and closer together. My experiences in Oaxaca, of not just drinking mezcal, but going out and visiting palenques with different chefs I had gotten to know as they were buying mezcal for their restaurants, hearing stories at the palenques, interest in craft food, interest in economic development, interest in agriculture. And it was just like all of it combined. And when the
So
co-founder
it
of
kind of found you.
Mezcalistas, yes,
All
it
your
absolutely
things that you kind of tested out, just the world collided in it, and it found you. You put it
did.
out there, and it kind of grabbed onto you. That's cool.
And it just, it just kind of happened. And so when Max Garoni, the co-founder of Mezcalistas, was in Oaxaca with his wife, who I had worked with, we had gotten together. I took them out to a few different palenques, and afterward, he was just like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! We should start a blog." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. I don't know how to do that." And he's like, "I do." And so we started the blog Mezcalistas, which has grown over time to
And
be
how long
what
ago
it
was
is
that?
today. That was in February of 2012.
Okay, so 11
So
years.
yeah, 11 years, which is
You've
not
had
that long a
great
period
decade.
of time. Yeah, but it's a long period of time. I mean, it was living in San Francisco and begging people, chefs and bartenders that both Max and I knew, begging them to come over to my house for a mezcal tasting with stuff that I had come back, because that's where we were at that time. People didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And so it was really pushing. Our first tasting events that we did were illegal underground events at an
That's
art
how it all
gallery
starts.
in the Mission. Always, it always starts that way. And then we got legal, and Mexico in a Bottle was born in 2014. And maybe we had 200 people at that event, maybe.
That's
And
big.
and each year it has grown, it has grown, it has grown. And now we're in 5 cities across the US doing this tasting event, which is what provides the funding to run the Mezcalistas website. So I always like to say that to people. It's like, the website does not pay for itself. It is the money suck. And we have to find all sorts of ways to pay for, publishing articles, paying writers, like doing all of that. So the Mexico in a Bottle event is one revenue source, and the primary revenue source.
So how did you pick the other cities outside of San Francisco?
In having the newsletter, it was watching open rates in other places. It was looking at trends of what are developing markets, and where are there enough accounts to be able to support this kind of event. And so the first city that we expanded to was Chicago, which has, number one, a very large Mexican American community, the largest outside of Los Angeles. And there were agave focused bars that had started opening. And also too, it is a city that drinks spirits neat. So you don't have to do that, initial like kind of training of, don't drink it only in a cocktail, drink it neat, drink it like this. And it was a great first city to expand into. The second city was New York. The third place we expanded to was San Diego, and then Washington, D.C. And I will fully admit that, Washington, D.C. had a lot to do with, I wanted an excuse to be able to go back to DC.
Yeah, 100%. Makes total sense.
But also we began a relationship with the Mexican Cultural Institute in Washington, D.C. that is housed in the former embassy residence. It's a stunningly beautiful location. And it also happened to be 2017 when Trump took office. And I really thought it was an important and subtle thing to do, to have an event at the Mexican Cultural Center that was so celebratory of Mexican culture and, the incredible breadth of craft products that were coming out of the country. And it went really well. And so we're like, okay, we'll stay in DC. And people come down from New York, and people come up from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And we eventually stopped doing the event in New York because there is another mezcal promoter educator, Jose Maria Donde, and he has Panorama Mezcal, and he produces beautiful tasting events. So, and I was just at one called Mujeres de Mezcal, and it's like, support Chema, and his tasting events. And then we've also been in Denver, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. So, and
what is the
looking
layout
at other
of the
markets.
event?
The
What's it like?
I mean, it's a walk around tasting.
Okay.
And so all of the vendors have their own table, which they can decorate however they want. And we also include, local, primarily Mexican restaurants in the event, who provide little bites and also cocktail sips. We have a program in which we commission a piece of art from a local artist in the market, display that. We have background music. We usually work with artisans who, can set up a little store selling artisan goods from Mexico. And then it's just like letting people in. There's no taking something from a table without talking to somebody. So you get your vaso veladora when you come in the door, and then in order to get something poured, like, you have to have a conversation with someone. And
Nice.
and that's always been the idea, to have like this, soft touch education in we say a celebratory environment. It is not a party environment.
Right.
Celebratory, and always presenting with food, with art, with music, so that it's not just a spirit that is kind of separated from the culture from which it comes.
And is it mezcal
So
only?
we also have bacanora, raicilla, sotol. Little did we know when we named it Mexico in a Bottle that, we would be able to liqueurs. There's also Mexican rum and whiskey and gin. It's a wide variety. And there is tequila. And that's usually because a tequila is part of a mezcal portfolio.
Yeah.
And we vet the tequilas so that they're in line with kind of the principles around mezcal. So
Gotcha.
it's and every tequila brand wants to be part of this, and it's always like, I'm sorry.
So is this consumer driven or also distribution?
It's a balance between industry and consumer.
Okay.
So, it's probably what had started in San Francisco was probably like 70% industry, 30% consumer. It's now like 50-50 in San Francisco, maybe a few more consumer than industry. So it just depends on the market that we're in, how new the market is, how established agave spirits are. But it's, because obviously we want industry to come to events.
For sure.
Yeah. So.
And is it just one day, or is it over a series of couple of days?
It's one day.
Okay.
It is 3 hours. Industry people get in a half hour early. We will usually do adjunct events around. So like in Phoenix, we had a blind tasting. We had a special dinner with a chef from Monterey. There were a couple of happy hours. And then there was the event in San Diego. We've got a Mexican gin garden party that we're having the day before in the afternoon. There are a couple of happy hours. There's the main events in San Francisco. We've actually got some pretty exciting things lined up, and so one of them is going to be a talk about the denominación de origen. And we've got some special guests coming in for that. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
whenever this gets announced,
So when are you coming to Texas? Is it on your roadmap?
I mean, it just depends on a lot of things. Number one is figuring out how to do an alcohol event in Texas, and talking to some different distributors. I mean, Texas is its own special animal. It's a 4-tier system, which
it's
even takes it beyond just being a control state. It is, there are a lot of complications around that. It is so much easier to do events in states like California, Illinois, New York.
I just went to a Hispanic food and beverage expo, and they had alcohol and beer. So if you want me to get you in touch with that person that organized it, I can always hook you guys up, and he can kind of.
It's not that it can't be done. It's it's like you can do these events.
It's navigating,
but it's navigating it, and because Texas is a 4-tier system, my understanding is that the brands who would participate in a tasting event like Mexico in a Bottle would actually have to buy their product back from a retailer. So it's not like being able to pull it from their distributor.
No, you can't pull samples.
So it makes it a lot more expensive for brands to participate, in the events. So
that's a bummer.
Yeah,
they need to get rid of that.
We'll figure it out.
We need some activists in Texas to get rid of that. But it'll never happen. It just isn't going to happen.
Well, I mean, I think nationwide, the alcohol laws that are on the books are so antiquated, and have very little to do with where we are now. It's like it was set up in the wake of prohibition, with the idea of must combat crime, must do these things, and the end result is today is it's a system that very much benefits big, huge, giant companies and makes it really hard for small craft spirits companies to navigate. And I'm talking about like every small craft spirit, be it, made in the US or made outside the US.
So going back to you, I know we don't have much time. Do you have any mentors or resources that you just want to mention or shout out? Maybe talk about your blog or where you can find the blog.
Yeah, people should visit www.mezcalistas.com. So it's mezcal and then istas, istas.com. I mean, it's really, mentors. I will say Misty Calcafin from Del Maguey, or previously she worked at Del Maguey, has been a huge resource and mentor for me, in really providing so much time and energy and information about mezcal. Sandra Ortiz Brennan from In Situ Mezcaleria in Oaxaca has been another huge just point of knowledge person for me. But a lot of what I have learned in navigating, and this goes to the publishing side of stuff, and doing talks. A person who I consider a huge mentor is Naomi Starkman, who runs a food and ag blog called Civil Eats. And they publish brilliant articles. They go in depth on things. I can only hope that, we are close to being at, anywhere near the level of what they do. And I met her and worked with her on the slow food events that happened in San Francisco in 2007, 2008. God, I can't remember the year anymore. And she's very brilliant. And I learned a lot from her on how you distill knowledge and how you can make it understandable for a larger audience. And yes, 3 women.
I love it. It's awesome. Any major challenges or trends that you want to mention?
Yeah, I mean, we really didn't touch on, what the major challenges are of mezcal becoming such a hot thing. And that is environmental challenges. The impact that the cultivation of more agave has on the land, the impact that byproduct waste has on the land, and just the impact that this is having on communities, rural communities that are having to navigate kind of a market-based system that has not been part of, their cultural or traditional experience. And it is hugely challenging. And I hope that, doing education, talking about the various issues, get people to understand, why does mezcal cost what it does? It's working with, limited resources. It is handmade. It is, it has all of this cultural tradition and history behind it. And I don't think it's something that we should be consuming on a daily, regular basis in large amounts. This is a spiritual drink. It is something that, I was doing a mezcal tasting talk yesterday, and and just said this is the last gift that the agave plant gives us. Up until that point when it's harvested. Prior to that, it has been providing tools, food, shelter, fibers in making clothes and things like that. And then it reaches the end of its life, the plant I'm talking about, and that's when it's harvested and made into a spirit, and that is its final gift to us. And I think to separate mezcal from the role that it plays as part of this larger culture would be a very, very, very sad thing, because it is different. Mm-hmm. It's not vodka. It's not vodka, people. It's like
it's not.
It's not. And to recognize the craft and the skill that goes into the making of every bottle of mezcal is, and I'll say that in general of agave spirits. I had the opportunity to visit Tequila Ocho, and it blew my mind, the new distillery, because of course I come from the mezcal world, and this distillery is able to produce up to 80,000 liters of tequila a month. And I'm like, 80,000 liters a month. Wow. Oh my God. Because that's like, that's giant. That's ginormous for mezcal. For the tequila industry, that is not big at all. That puts it like kind of in the middle, maybe, size of production. And there, it's so meticulous how they are doing the production, the thought that they are putting into it, how they are growing. And so, of course, you are going to pay a lot more for a bottle of tequila ocho because all of that, what they're doing, goes into that bottle.
Yep.
And, and we have to look at it the same way, like with a bottle of Fortaleza or, several other tequilas. The same thing with Mezcal. It's like we have to look at it in the same way. And to do a race to the bottom to like get to like bottles that are going to cost between $20 to $30 in the market on a regular basis is just like,
Right.
so
Skip
yeah.
it. So do
Yeah.
you have any outlook or any trends that you want to mention that you're seeing?
Oh, trends. I mean, I think, trends going forward, we're going to continue to see a lot more brands coming into the market. I think it's a challenging market for people to come into because while on the one hand, it's like Mezcal is growing, agave spirits is growing. All of that is true. But where do you sell it into? And I think that's still a question. I think as of today, the majority of the sales in Mezcal still come from the higher volume kind of mezcals that are being used in cocktails. So I think, we'll just see a lot of transitions happening over the next 5 years. I don't see mezcal as a trend. I think it's something that's here. I think, it's like, wasn't when Patron came out in the 90s, people were like, ooh, it's a trend. How many years later are we? And tequila has continued to grow and grow and grow. I think we're also going to continue to see brands that come into the market that are very much removed from where they're from. I think we'll continue to see more celebrity brands coming in. Like recently, there was this notice of one of the housewives of New York who's, starting a mezcal brand. Mezcaloon is what it's called. And it's just like, and it's great because it's like low calorie and it's gluten free. And, it's like, this is the talking points around it. And it's just like, hopefully they'll bring in a couple of pallets and then, that'll be it. I'm sure the people who are, who like it, who will like it. But, and I think we will continue to see that. But
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. But I always like to keep a glasses half full outlook. I do believe that there's room in the market for everybody. It is, however, up to consumers to ensure that there is room in the market for everybody. So, drink those fine, beautiful mezcals. Support those. Support brands that are really doing mindful things in their approach, and production and selling and all of that.
It's interesting. It's a kind of a movement in the beverage industry, because I interviewed a couple gentlemen in the coffee industry, and they're saying the exact same thing. Like, find out where it's made, how it's made, find out, what the quality is it sustainable? Are they doing the right things for the industry? Because those are the people that we really, want to invest in.
Yeah. And I think, people put a lot of thought into what they're eating. And, and having come from kind of the know your farmer background, having worked at farmers markets, there is that interest. People want to know, where is this coming from? How is it being grown? There's a reason why organic is huge. And it's shocking to me that same kind of thought is not put into what it is you're drinking. Because like beverage, what it is we're drinking is so much more important for our bodies, given how much water is in our bodies. And, we need to apply that same kind of thought process to what we're drinking, so that we're not putting terrible, awful things into our body that totally, like negates any of the good food that we might be eating. So, you know.
Yeah. So the last question, I know you got to go, is what do you do for fun outside of work? What do you like to do?
This is a question that I have to ask myself a lot these days. It used to be that mezcal was my passion outside of work. I had day jobs through much of the early inceptions of Mezcalistas and Mexico in a Bottle. And then I took on the guardianship of my nephew. And so the last, kind of 10 years has very much been family, building a business, family, building a business. And now he's off in college. And I'm like, damn, what am I going to do? I have free time for the first time in years.
Yeah.
and I'm, it's really one of those things where I am trying to like, well, what hobby do I want to do? Like, what do I want to take up? Like, I don't know. Actually, I did take up pickleball. And so that has been fun. So I like playing pickleball. I used to play tennis, all of those things. But it's like trying to find, as you said, those other things. I love to dance. There are things that have changed over the last 10 years. Number one, I'm 10 years older.
Right.
I used to love to go out dancing. And now it's like to go out dancing to a club is just like, wow, I'm really a lot older than people here.
Be in bed by 10, it'd be great. There's a new concept and then create for us,
exactly. I know. I mean, and it's, and it sounds terrible. It's not like I'm like, oh, I'm so tired and I, like I need to be in bed by such and such a time. But, there is a reality.
Yeah, there's a reality that we just can't recover as fast.
No, I mean, that's the reality.
Yeah, and it's not even the drinking. Yeah. I mean, that of course that plays a part, but it's just your sleep patterns off. You don't get enough sleep. You just feel tired. It's kind of a bummer.
It's very, I know, it's kind of a bummer. And then, of course, as a woman, you hit a certain age and you're not sleeping anyhow.
I've learned about that.
Perimenopause. Which wreaks havoc.
They're like, I could be 10 years. Nobody tells you that. And I'm like, what?
Nobody tells you that.
It is great.
So there is life outside of mezcal. And that's been, I will say I long for the day when I can go to Oaxaca and not have it have anything to do with work. Oaxaca had been like the place that I would go to restore my soul.
Yeah, your sanctuary.
For those months, it was just like, and hang out with my amazing friends. And then, like mezcal came into the picture and it became, each time going back, became more about work. And now it's just to the point where it's like, I don't want to go unless I can be guaranteed that like, I don't have to deal with any like work stuff. I want to go to the mountains. I want to see my friends.
Yeah. Just want to relax.
I know. So I look forward to that, going to the beach, something like that. And just like not ever having to think about a work thing at all. Which is a terrible thing to say because I am so lucky and privileged that I have managed to carve out a space where I am highly fulfilled on every level.
That's amazing.
With what I am able to do. It is something that gives me great joy. It's just like, I'm humbled, I'm honored. It's amazing. But yeah, I just want a vacation in Oaxaca.
Well, maybe go, don't tell anyone.
Yeah. Someday. But yes.
Well, that's fun. You're kind of in a new discovery period of your life, and you get a little bit of time for yourself, and I look forward to seeing you go on your journey. It's really exciting.
Thank you. And likewise, I can't wait to see where this podcast goes. So
yeah, my 2 to 3 o'clock this morning, I came up with a lot of really fun ideas. So, I want to get into food tech, food innovation, and not just be, all in on beverage. And I want to be the source where people come for new product launches, and we'll just do like a 5 to 10 minute segment, boom, done, and
yep.
Like I call it the Launchpad series. I don't know why, but that's what it is. And just have some fun with it. The podcast is certainly one of the best things I've ever done. I love it so much, meeting people like you that are doing amazing things in our industry, and being able to tell your story and help educate people, and resources people. I don't know Mezcal like you know Mezcal, so for me to just sit here and listen to you talk about it with such passion and adoration is just, it's a privilege. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I say thanks for giving the space to do it. It's been an awesome little more than an hour.
I know. I'm so sorry you gotta go.
No, that's okay.
It's okay. Okay. Well, we have to plan to meet at some point. Maybe I'll get to one of your events one of these days.
That would be good.
Yeah, I'd love to come check it out.
Think about San Francisco, November 12th.
Oh,
just throwing it out there.
I'd love to. That sounds awesome. I haven't been there in, I don't know, maybe 10 years. So I'm sure a lot's changed.
A lot's changed. It's not falling into the sea. It's not about to explode. It's not on the edge of destruction. It's not a failing city. Any of those things that the news out there would have you believe. Are there rough things? Absolutely. Yeah. Everything is rough right now, everywhere.
Yeah, well, real estate's expensive. The cost of living is expensive, and it just prices people out.
Yep. And it's very true. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, I know. I experienced it in New York too. I had a great setup. I figured out how to get a really cool setup in Queens and made it work. But it's hard. It's challenging, and that was a long, long time ago. Like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever it was. Anyway. I will let you go, and we'll be in touch, and I'll let you know when we go live with the podcast. Oh, and we're going on the YouTube at some point too.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you so much.
I need a full-time staff.
Ciao. I hear that. I hear that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Cool.
Bye.
Ciao.
This week's episode was produced by Fedora J Productions.